Hey everybody! Today we're going to talk about Bloom's taxonomy, and I'm going to do two videos today. This one and the next one will be on 3 kinds of knowledge, and each of these videos will help you do 2 of the assignments that are due in Unit 3 of our course. So let's get started with our Bloom's taxonomy. You may be wondering, why in the world do we need to learn something like this? Teachers learn this information all the time. They use it all the time because they're very concerned about the level of questions that they ask their students to make sure that those levels of questions are challenging. And so this gentleman named Bloom, Benjamin Bloom, studied that very thing. He thought, now, are there more types of thinking than just one? And the answer is yes, is what he came up with. He came up with 6 types. And so before I show you that pyramid that shows the hierarchy of this thinking, these levels of thinking, I want you to see that in our Blackboard, I've sent you an announcement that has all of the handouts that I'll be using for this demonstration. I do apologize for this misspelled word right here. I just now saw that. But all of these links will take you to the handouts that you need for this particular lesson. So let's start out with our pyramid, looking at those levels. Here they are. And so remember, if you remember something requires the least amount of thinking, all you're doing is recalling, restating. You're not even having to understand it, okay? So you're just remembering information, recognizing and recalling facts. This is the kind of thing that you do when you take a matching test. So you take a test and you're going to match the word with the definition, the vocabulary word with the definition. You draw a line from the word to the definition. You're just remembering. You don't even have to understand it. You don't have to use it. You don't have to make anything with those words, not creating sentences. You're just recalling, okay? And the part that's very important to know about this whole idea is, as a student, it's important for you to know what kind of thinking is expected of you in all of your classes. So if you go into a class thinking, I'm just going to memorize this stuff so I can get my A and get out, the expectation of the course, the expectation of the content of that course, or the instructor of that course may be requiring you to think higher than just memorizing. They may be requiring you to think much higher than that. So if you stay on the remembering level, you're going to be frustrated. Okay, so remembering, we're just recalling facts. Understand is our second level. If you understand information, that means not only can you remember it, but now you can put it in your own words. You can paraphrase it. You can state it in words that you would use. You could summarize it. Okay, so I'm going beyond remembering when I understand. I'm not just repeating what I've heard. That would be remembering. If I understand something, that means I can restate it in the way I would restate it. I can paraphrase it. I can explain it. Okay? The next level is apply. If you can apply something, not only do you remember it, not only do you understand it, now you can take that information and use it to perform a task. You can take that information and use it to perform a task. You can take that information and use it in an illustration, an example, okay? So we're going higher. Now, those 3 levels are the 3 lowest levels of thinking. And so if you go into any of the classes that you're taking as a student with just those 3 levels in mind, then there are going to be some times when you will not reach the level of expectation of that course or of that teacher. And if you don't understand this, it could be frustrating. Why can't I get a better grade in this class? Well, the course may be requiring you to do more than just remember and understand and apply. It may be asking you to think higher than that. Those are the next 3 we're going to go in. Or, by the way, you might be in a class where you are expecting to think higher on a higher level, but the class is only requiring you to do lower level thinking. That's a frustrating experience too. But let's go on to analyze. Analyze is our next level. If you're able to analyze information that you've just learned, not only do you remember it, not only can you understand it, in other words, put it in your own words, not only can you use it to perform a task, now you're able to study the parts. You're able to break it down into parts and look at those individual parts, see how they fit together, see why they don't fit with other things. Some of the verbs that you could associate with analyzing are comparing and contrasting. Sometimes you may distinguish between one part and another part. Sometimes you can think of advantages and disadvantages. All of those ways are ways of analyzing information, okay? It's definitely a higher order thinking task. The next level is evaluate. Okay, if you evaluate, and you evaluate all the time. So if you order food and the food comes to you, you take a look at the food, you decide, oh yeah, that's good, I can eat that. Or you may look at it and say, I don't like that. You've just made an evaluative statement that it's good or bad, tasty or not tasty, flavorful or not flavorful. Those are evaluation statements. It's a judgment. And so this says judging the value of information or ideas. Okay? So the best way to make those evaluation statements is if you can do all those things underneath. Can you remember? Do you recall? In other words, restate. Do you understand the concept? Can you put it in your own words? Can you apply the concept? In other words, take that information and use it to perform a task. Can you analyze the different parts? Good, bad, disadvantages, advantages, compare, contrast. Now you can evaluate, making a judgment about that concept. And then the highest level of thinking is creating. That's where you're going to take this new information that you've learned, you're going to put it with some information that you possibly already know, maybe with some other new information, you're going to create something new. And that creation could be something that's new to you, or it could be something new that no one's ever thought of before, okay? Those are the 6 levels. What we're going to do now is start applying those 6 levels to 3 different topics. We're going to look at a speech, and we're going to take 2 concepts after that, a speech and 2 concepts. We're going to go through all 6 of these levels, looking at each one of those 3 things, and then I'll explain to you what your homework assignment is, because your homework assignment is going to be exactly that. All right, so let's take a look at, this is a speech or some information, a speech I think it was, by Bernie Sanders back in 2016 when he was hoping to be a presidential candidate. And he had an idea for college tuition to be free for students. Okay, so we're going to use this topic and we're going to apply, we're going to apply those 6 levels of thinking to this topic so that I can illustrate for you how you would approach information differently according to the level of thinking that's required. Okay, so before we do that, let's get a little acquainted with our topic, this issue of it's time to make college tuition free and debt free by Bernie Sanders. In this highly global, competitive global economy, we need the best educated workforce in the world. It is insane and counterproductive to the best interests of our country and our future that hundreds of thousands of bright young people cannot afford to go to college, and that millions of others leave school with a mountain of debt that burdens them for decades. That short-sighted path to the future must end. Bernie Sanders will fight to make sure that every American who studies hard in school can go to college regardless of how much money their parents make and without going deeply into debt. That's the gist of this whole thing. And I'm not going to read the rest to you, but I will point out his 6 steps that he would take to make college debt free. Okay? So the first step, he said he would make tuition free at public colleges and universities. And these next 2 paragraphs explain the rationale for that. The second one, he'd stop the federal government from making a profit on student loans. And then he explains that. Substantially cut student loan interest rates. And then he explains that one. Allow Americans to refinance student loans at today's low interest rates. He gives an explanation for that as well. Allow students to use need-based financial aid and work-study programs to make college debt-free. He explains that one. And then his last approach of the 6 is he would pay for this fully paid for by imposing a tax on Wall Street speculators. That's how he would pay for this whole plan. Okay, so that's our concept in a nutshell. Let's go now and let's apply those 6 levels of thinking to the content of that speech. Okay, so if I'm going to think just on the remembering knowledge level, and I've got this answer for you here because we're just doing kind of a guided practice right now, I would answer a question such as, identify one of the steps Bernie Sanders plans to take to eliminate college-related debt. Now, let me stop here and say this. For this little guided practice activity, we are not answering the questions that come from that passage. That's not the point of this. The point of this activity is to look at the level of thinking that is required to answer these questions, okay? So the first one, identify one of the steps that is part of the plan. We know that this is a knowledge or remembering level because it's only asking us to recall. We could actually go back to that speech and pick out one of those steps. We don't have to understand that step. We don't have to explain that step. We don't have to analyze that step. All we have to do is copy it word for word, actually, one of those steps, because it is part of the remembering level to just simply identify, okay? All right, so let's go back and look to see what else we have here. So if you were in my face-to-face class, or if you were actually online with me at this point, here is where I would have the class think of a question that you could ask based on our Bernie Sanders topic here. And I would ask you to write another knowledge or remembering level question, okay? So remembering that when you write that question, all you would be expecting the answerer to do is go back to the speech exactly the way it's written and pick out an answer, because it requires no more thinking than that. All right, let's go on to the next level. Explain why Senator Sanders wants to eliminate college tuition and debt. Remember, we are not answering the question. We're looking at how the question is structured. This one is structured on the comprehension and understanding level. How do we know that? Because in order to demonstrate comprehension and understanding, you have to be able to put it in your own words. And this word right here gives us that clue. Explain why he wants to eliminate college debt. So I could go back to Bernie Sanders' speech. I can read that speech again. I should be able to pick out remembering why he wants to do that. But this one says to me to explain it, to put it in my own words, to paraphrase it, to summarize it. That will demonstrate my level of understanding, that second level of thinking. Okay, so we just did the first level of thinking, which is knowledge and remembering. We identified something. We just simply repeated what we saw written down. We just went through the second level, which is comprehension and understanding. Now this time we're asked to explain it, put it in our own words. We've reached the second level. Let's move on to the third. Look at this question. How would Sanders' ideas about paying for college affect your own college experience? Oh, this is asking us to do something more than just repeating it, which is level 1, or just explaining it, which is level 2. Now it's asking us to apply it, taking a new concept and using it to perform a task. What task is it asking us to perform? We're going to see how Bernie Sanders' plan would affect our own college experience. So now if I were to answer that question, I would need to go back to those 6 steps. I would need to think about my own experience going to college and paying for it. And I would say, now how would that plan affect me? Would I find much relief if this plan were in place? Would I still be in debt? Would I be relieved of my debt? How so? I'm making that applicable to me. That's an application level. Making it applicable doesn't always mean making it applicable to you. It simply means taking that new concept and using it to perform a task. So it could be someone else's experience. It could be something completely different, but you are applying, you're taking that learning and you are using it to perform a task. That's the apply level. Okay, so this is what it looks like on the knowledge and remembering level, comprehension level, apply level. Those are the 3 lowest levels of thinking. Let's take it up higher. Now we're going to analyze. What do you think are the advantages and disadvantages of eliminating college tuition? Okay, now we're being asked to analyze. Because now we're going to look at advantages and disadvantages. Remember, when we looked at our pyramid on the other slide, when you're analyzing, you're breaking things down into parts, and you're looking at those parts, okay? That's exactly what we're having to do here, because here we're looking at the advantages and disadvantages of the college tuition plan. What's good about it? What's bad about it? And I'm not going to necessarily find that in the speech that we have. We're not necessarily going to find that in the text. Now we're taking what we have learned so far. We're looking at pros and cons. Another way that you can analyze is looking at comparison and contrast. What does Bernie Sanders' plan look like as opposed to someone else's plan? Who else has a college plan out there? Maybe Joe Biden, maybe some other person who's running for president. What is their plan? What are the advantages and disadvantages as they relate to someone else's plan? That's analyzing. Much higher than just remembering or recalling, much higher than just understanding where you put things in your own words, much higher than applying where you're going to take a concept and use it to perform a task. We are studying each part of the plan. We're analyzing. Okay? Next level is evaluation. Let's look at this. Using a Likert scale. Okay, every one of us has worked with a Likert scale before. If you've ever ordered anything from Amazon, which a lot of people have been doing these days because we're stuck inside because of the quarantine. Yeah, a lot of times at the end, they'll send you a survey. How was your experience? Rate your experience. They're asking you for a judgment. They're asking you for an evaluation. That's what this is, okay? So you're going to rate your level of agreement with Senator Sanders' ideas. Do you totally agree, no opinion, disagree, totally disagree? Remember, we're not answering the question. We're looking at the type of question. What level of thinking is required? We know that this is the evaluate level, okay? Now that we've done all this other thinking, lowest level, higher level comprehension, applying it, analyzing it, now we are judging it. We're evaluating it, okay? And in this, if I were to answer this question, it would be something along the lines of, I think his plan would work well because, and then I would give my opinion about that. Or, I don't think his plan would work at all because, and I would rate. But I would need to understand all these others. I would need to know the plan. I would need to understand the plan. I would be able to apply the plan to my own life. I would be able to analyze it before I could evaluate it, because this is definitely a higher level of thinking. Last level, create. Okay? If you were responsible for designing a plan to help students with college tuition, what would it include? Now we're talking about creating, because I'm not asking you just to regurgitate what you've read about his plan. I'm asking you because I now have an assumption you got a deep understanding, a deep grasp of this plan. Then now you're able to take that plan, put it with some other knowledge that you already have, and make something new. And that new thing may be new to you, maybe not new to other people, or it could be new to everybody because it's a brand new idea that nobody's thought of before. Okay? That's creating, taking something you already have, something you already know, putting it together with this new information that you've gained, and you're creating something that hasn't been considered before. Okay, so we have looked at our entire pyramid. We've looked at each of these levels individually. We have read Bernie Sanders' speech, and then we have looked at these different levels of thinking as these relate to Bernie Sanders' speech. That's the first thing. Remember, I told you we're going to do 3 things applying these 6 levels of thinking. This was the first, Bernie Sanders' speech. Here's the second. We're going to look at a topic, another topic. This time it's autonomous learning. That's a topic that we study in this course, becoming an autonomous learner. We're going to apply all 6 levels of thinking to this topic, And this time, as you follow along on my screen, you're going to get to see examples of responses that you could give when you get your own topic at the end of this lesson. And by the way, I'm going to keep you out of suspense. The topic you're going to do for your homework is multitasking. Multitasking, okay? But let's save that part for a little bit later. Let's take on this topic of autonomous learning. If I think about autonomous learning on the remembering stage, what do I need to do with that? What kind of answer would I put if I were going to demonstrate what learning looks like on the remembering level, on the remembering thinking level, that lowest level possible, when I consider this topic of autonomous learning? Well, it's easy as pie. I would just go look up the definition. Because remember, for the remembering level, for the recalling level, for this lowest level, which is also called the knowledge level, I don't need to understand it. All I need to do is just be able to say it, to recall it, to restate it. And that's what this person did here. You're going to state verbatim the definition, facts about the concept. Here it is. Our textbook describes autonomous learning as the process whereby you will carefully assess your current situation as a student, determine specific short and long-term academic goals based upon your values, chart changes necessary to reach these goals, and then make those changes. Notice these quotes here. This person went to our textbook and copied word for word that definition. They even went further and included all these 6 steps of autonomous learning. That's just pure copying from the textbook, which would be plagiarizing if we didn't cite it. That's another lesson that we did earlier. But back to this lesson. The point is, the remembering level does not require you to do any higher level thinking than just giving back what somebody has given to you. And in this case, it's copying from the textbook, copying from a dictionary, Googling it online. Okay, those are other ways that you would just simply remember something or recall something, the knowledge level. And again, why is this important for you? If you enter all of your classes or approach all of your classes, now that you're in college, with this idea that, you know what, I don't understand what's going on in that math class, in that history class, whatever class it is, but if I just memorize what the teacher says and just give it back to him on the test, I should be all right. No. There may be some instances where you might get by with that, but most of your college instructors are going to require much higher level thinking, and you need to know that. You need to know what kind of thinking is required of you so that you can meet that expectation. All right, so that's the remembering level on autonomous learning. Let's look at the second level, understanding. Still with that same topic, autonomous learning. This one requires you to paraphrase, to explain, put it in your own words. So here's an example of what you could put for this topic. This person wrote in his own words, her own words, autonomous learning is the process of becoming more independent as a student. It allows a student to think about what she wants, to accomplish, to plan for it, and to move through the process while deciding what is working well and what still needs improvement. Those were that person's own words. That's demonstrating the understand level. Okay, we're moving on higher. We're now to the apply level. What kind of thinking? What would I do as it relates to the concept of autonomous learning? What would I do to show that this level would be, this thinking level is the apply level? You could give examples of yourself, and that's what this person did. So for this level, think of an example of a term. In other words, we're going to take this concept of autonomous learning and use it to perform a task. We're going to use it to illustrate this task that we would do. An example of an autonomous learner is a student who monitors every academic action, from keeping up to the assignment deadlines to making time to meet with the professor when questions arise, and everything in between. Other examples include monitoring grades, reading the instructor's feedback, and discussing progress with a tutor. In all these examples, the student is the one who takes the initiative. This is a demonstration of applying the concept of autonomous learning to a real life situation. Okay? So if I were thinking of this for myself, I would say, okay, I'm going to apply the concept of autonomous learning. I have to work every day at my job from 7 in the morning until 6 at night. I work hard all day long. I don't have time during the day to read my chapter for my class. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take an autonomous learner step by getting up extra early. I'm going to get up at 4:30 and read from 4:45 until 6:45. And that way I'll get my chapter read before I'm too tired to read it in the evening. That is an example of an autonomous learning move. I just applied autonomous learning. Okay? So that's something that you can do. We're moving on to the next step. Analyze. Okay, now, taking this thinking even higher. Remember, when you analyze a concept, you can do a number of things. You can compare and contrast. You can show advantages and disadvantages. You can distinguish that concept from other concepts. All of those are analyzing because you're breaking down the concept, you're looking at pieces. This is what this person decided to do. This person decided to look at the concept of autonomous learning. What does it look like as a high school student, and what does it look like as a college student? And they took the topic of turning in work, monitoring progress, action planning. So if I'm turning in work as a high school student, that autonomous learning may look like, well, if I turn in late work, my teacher just deducts a few points. That's not too much of autonomous learning, is it? But in college, my psychology professor expects me to turn in all work by a weekly deadline. This person gave an example of how autonomous learning is apparently much more of a responsibility in that college student's life than it was in the high school life. They're making a comparison contrast, okay? You don't have to set yours up exactly like that. You could go about it a different way. You could say, my autonomous learning now, as opposed to 10 years from now, what would autonomous learning look like for me today? What might it look like when I'm working on my PhD? That's a way to look at it, okay? So you are breaking the things down in parts. You're looking at it. That's analyzing, all right? 2 more levels. Evaluating is the next level. Drawing conclusions, making a judgment. That's what you're doing when you're evaluating, okay? You're rating it. We go through this all the time. I rate or make an evaluation of the work that you turn into me. I grade it. That's an evaluation, a rating. You rate your professors, okay? You decide which ones work best for you in your learning path, which ones aren't so great. That's rating. That's evaluating. That's what this is. But you can't do any of that unless you've done all these other steps. You have the capability of doing all these other levels of thinking, okay? So, draw conclusions. That's what you're doing. There are benefits to becoming an autonomous learner. I don't worry as much about forgetting things. I feel more in charge of my life, and I look to my professor to support me, but not hold my hand and do things for me. This person just drew a conclusion about the concept of autonomous learning. And then the last level is create. You're thinking of something new using the information that you've learned and putting that with some things you already know. Okay, so maybe someone could create an app to help new college students plan and organize their semester. This is their idea, their creative idea for autonomous learning. All right, so we just finished the second example. So I taught you looking at this little pyramid here, told you what each of these meant. Then we looked at this as it related to Bernie Sanders' speech. We looked at remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, creating as it related to this speech. We went through a little handout where we looked at examples using that speech. Then we looked at the same levels of thinking as it related to autonomous learning. We went through all 6 levels again. We're going to go through it one more time with another topic, and this time it's microaggression. And again, when you did this on your own, your topic is multitasking. That's the assignment that you're going to turn in to me. And your assignment is going to look just like this. You're going to have a remembering example, an understand example, an apply example. You're going to pattern your assignment exactly after this. Okay, so here's our last demonstration. Do you know what a microaggression is? Just in case you've never heard that word before, because we're going to look at this definition here in just a few minutes because it's on the remembering level. It's a little statements that people make thinking that they have the facts, but they really are sadly misinformed and they're making assumptions. I'll give you an example of one. My husband told me about this. My husband was on a trip He was on a business trip, dressed in a suit, about to go to a meeting. He got on the elevator from his hotel. He was going downstairs to the lobby to catch his cab or whatever he was taking to his meeting. And so he gets on the elevator. A woman gets on the elevator about halfway down, and she takes a look at my husband and she says, sir, would you please push button number 3? I'm going down to the 3rd floor. That was a microaggression because she assumed that my husband was the doorman. He was a man standing there in a suit, African-American man. She was thinking he was the doorman. That's a microaggression. All of us have experienced that at some point, and experienced something like that, where someone made an assumption. And the thing about microaggressions is it may sound like something that, bad people do. Everybody has done it. Everybody. Okay, so that's our topic for this last example of our levels of thinking. Okay, so let's look at this topic of microaggression when it talks about the remembering level. What would we do to demonstrate our thinking if we're going to operate just on the remembering level? We would look it up. Look it up in the dictionary. Look it up online. Pull out your Google source, whatever. And we would simply copy a definition because all we're doing is recalling. I'm going to go a little faster this time. Understand what we do this time? If you were in my face-to-face class or if you were actually online with me, I would stop and give you an opportunity to respond. And I'm positive that you would respond by telling me that for the understand level, you would put it in your own words. You would rephrase it. You would summarize it. You would say it in a way that you would say it, okay? For the apply level, and of course, I'm not taking time to read exactly what's written here in front of you because you have access to this obviously through this video. And also if you go to Blackboard and click on your announcements, all of the handouts that I've gone over today are right there for you to see. You can follow along there as well and read it later on your own. So for the apply level, we're going to think of an example to apply this concept to a particular task. Okay, so an apply level, this is where you're going to, I'll read this one. A woman in the elevator clutches her purse. Okay, she's made an assumption about this person. That's a microaggression. Analyze. This time we're going to compare and contrast, or you can do an if then what, if this, then what statement. You can talk about advantages and disadvantages, okay? So there's an example there for analyze for you. For evaluate, we're drawing conclusions, we're rating, we're making a judgment. And I think this judgment is fabulous here. We all have biases that we need to keep in check. When we become aware of offending others, we should try to correct that behavior. That's an example of a conclusion that you can draw, an evaluative statement, all right, that you can make as it relates to microaggressions. And then for the create level, think of something new from what you already know about this concept. So now that we know what microaggressions are, we can put that together with other things that we know and come up with something that someone hasn't thought of before. It could be new to you, or it could be new to a whole bunch of people. Okay, so these examples: develop a workshop for community college faculty, which addresses the unintended ways faculty may treat students this way, or create a cultural awareness student organization to help address this issue at an institutional level. That, ladies and gentlemen, demonstrates how you can use all 6 levels of thinking. And remember, I've said this on a number of occasions, when you're taking this course, any course, but since we're talking about this course, I'm your instructor, I want you to remember that everything that we learn in here, it's not about making the grade. That is not the purpose at all. The purpose is for you to continue to build that quality world. Continue to have the tools you need to build that quality world. And this is one of the tools. One of the worst things is to go to a class over and over and over again, not know heads or tails of what's going on in that class, not knowing what's expected of you, not knowing how to go about thinking the way you need to in order to be successful. What we have gone over today is one of those tools that will help you get to that point. What does the content in whatever course you're taking expect of you? What does the instructor expect of you? What kind of thinking is required of you in that content from that instructor? And once you figure that out, once you realize that when I go to my art history class, or my art appreciation class, or go to my algebra class, or go to my history class, my psychology class, I now know that the content and the instructor expect me to think mostly on the analyzation level. I got to analyze when I go in that class. I'm just making this part up because your instructor may expect something different. But if you know I've got to analyze when I go in that class, you will stop just merely trying to remember definitions and regurgitating those things. I hope that you don't have many experiences where you're going into the class expecting to think on these higher levels, like creating and evaluating and analyzing, but the class and the instructor only expects you to think on the remembering and understanding. I hope that you don't have that experience. But if you do, it still sets you up for success because you know what to expect. And you can go into that course already knowledgeable about how to come out of that in a successful way. That's all for today, everybody. I'm going to stop it right there. My next video will cover the second lesson, which is 3 kinds of knowledge, and I'll talk with you later. Bye.